Hey everyone, happy FDS. I'm not super thrilled to be doing this as a pre-recorded presentation. I'd much rather be giving it to you live, but I have a conflict during my speaking slot time, and so here we are. Today, I'm going to be talking about value accrual in the Filecoin ecosystem in this multi-chain world, and what it might look like in Filecoin's future. And more specifically, as a preface, I've taken some time to step back a little bit, zoom out, and think, at least for me, bigger picture. I've spent a lot of time the last few years really jamming kind of the same approaches and strategies. And so I wonder if it's useful or productive to question the overall approaches of things and the pitches that we're giving for Filecoin, both to ourselves and to the greater world. And so my first slide in here is this is a presentation about what if. It's, I would say, a soft pitch, and I'm really looking for early feedback on this line of thinking. And this is sort of how I like to test out different ideas. I don't have all the answers in this presentation, of course, but I have some new line of thinking, at least for me, that I'd like to introduce to others and see how you feel and generally understand if there's a really flawed line of reasoning in here that is sort of existential to this type of pitch. Now, talking about value accrual for any ecosystem is a delicate topic because you have to admit it sometimes where you are and aren't valuable, and that can hurt the ego a little bit. And so I am critical at times of the projects and the strategies that we employ, but that's because I love the ecosystem and I'm really trying to help explore the ways to make Filecoin really strong and very valuable over a long period of time, hopefully forever. That's the long-term goal. So anyways, I'm just going to dive right in. And again, new thinking for me, soft pitch, but here we go. So one of the first things that I've sort of started with is thinking back to Filecoin's original thesis. And I reread the white paper before making this presentation. And one of the things that I both remember when I was first introduced to Filecoin back in 2017, 2018, was this idea of making useful work out of what was Bitcoin's proof of work, this sort of energy wasting guessing game, and how could we actually do better? And the idea there was to provide storage rather than computing random hashes. And that idea really stuck with me. There's also a lot of really cool and interesting theses around cloud market storage and just sort of open markets for decentralized storage through Filecoin. And this presentation is focused sort of on order of operations to get to certain places, right? So I think for me, the founding thesis of Filecoin is extremely strong and interesting, and we need to keep that as our North Star and don't lose sight of it because it did attract absolutely insane levels of mindshare and capital in the first few years of its evolution. And I think there is something to pay attention to there that for some reason now we don't have as much of, right? So the first thing I sort of think is helpful to do is revisit what do we know now that if in 2017 when the white paper was being written, would we have done the same strategies? Would we have put together the same approach? Again, same North Star, but what's the road and path to get there? And that's something that I think is really important to revisit and always question as builders in the ecosystem. And so here's a list. I won't go through all of them, but a list of new things, I think, that weren't around or that were maybe very hard to guess or would have been very weird to assume back when we first started. Hang on. So take a minute, you can read over this stuff. And just as a personal exercise in your own business or your own part of the ecosystem, had you known what the current state of the crypto economy and markets and the whole industry, if you knew what you knew now, would you take the same strategy? I think that's important. And again, it's counterproductive to say, oh, well, we regret the approach that we took. Almost all of us are doing the best we can with the information that we had. But now that we have new information, can we do better? And so this is a tough slide to talk about because Filecoin has problems. And this is not to say that they're any worse than any other blockchain ecosystem, right? Like relatively speaking, Filecoin has very similar problems as Ethereum, as other ecosystems. And we should really look at them. I think I've bolded the top one because the top one is, for me, a concern in that the storage providers that I've spoken to more recently are are not as confident as they once were in continuing to pledge on the network. And that right now is our one of our biggest moats in terms of the value proposition that we offer. And it's also from a value and like a financial engineering perspective, pledging is the number one reason that folks are accumulating Filecoin right now, like net new Filecoin, right? And so that is important to consider. How do we continue to make it attractive to pledge Filecoin? So again, I would sum up all of these problems into we're on our way to finding product market fit, right? And this is not a unique problem for Filecoin, just to reiterate that, right? And so we have our own unique flavors of this problem, but overall, this is a very common thing for pretty much any crypto project. So this to me is a lot of the conversations that we've had almost a year now, I think, or maybe even longer, is about finding product market fit for Filecoin. Because ultimately, when you talk about finding value or accruing value, the preface to that is finding product market fit. When you have something that people need, and when they get really angry if you take it away from them, you have an opportunity to create something that actually produces value. Well, you kind of already did, but you can realize value in more flexible ways. So this is where a new line of thinking that I've just been entertaining is something that I'm ready to at least share in tidbits. And so I think that there's an interesting angle here for Filecoin to position itself as a programmable proof of work like layer one blockchain. I think this is a interesting position to hold, and one that simplifies a lot of things for the ecosystem without taking much away. So I'm going to make a few claims. The first claim is that this concept, a proof of work-ish blockchain secured by hardware, had already found product market fit in the early days of Filecoin. When Filecoin was seeing crazy amounts of attraction and attention, the primary demand for the Filecoin outside of like speculative natures of it was to pledge it and to secure a blockchain network. And at that time, proof of stake did not exist. I mean, maybe some tidbits of research, but nothing like the merge or ETH 2.0. We didn't really know if it was possible, right? So again, there's interesting new information that we have now that said, hey, maybe it actually is important to solidify our position as a blockchain in a way that is valuable to the overall crypto economy in a multi-chain world. So it is that the aspect of Filecoin that is a proof of work chain that gets its security from hardware that would have at that time programmable actors and smart contract development, that to me had been validated from the periods of 2020 to say 2021 or 2022. Claim, oh, and again, just want to bring it back to this diagram that I stole from Juan or JV. We've seen this diagram a lot. And again, the flywheel is we want the demand for Filecoin and the capital coming into the economy to be greater than the capital leaving, right? And so today, the primary, I would say, the primary reason that capital comes into the ecosystem is for pledging Filecoin. And that is generally for securing the network. Of course, it is done in this sort of FIL plus fashion, but most of the storage providers on the network who are pledging enormous amounts of FIL are interested in the game of just crypto mining and also securing blockchain networks. And that's a truth that I think we should be in touch with when we talk about what value are we currently providing to the world. The second claim is, and this is the one that I'm honestly a little less confident in, and I'm really looking for feedback here, is that actually a programmable proof of work blockchain is a valuable position to hold. So one is like this top point, which is there is a ton of idle storage in the world. We know that because a lot of it, 17 exabytes of raw power back like a few years ago was mining Filecoin, was on the network, and that is an enormous amount of capacity, and this is actually product market fit for the crypto mining community. It's a different immediate vision than that long-term North Star in the white paper, but I'm going to get there. It's an order of operations kind of thing. The second thing is more recent, which is that we do see rise in popularity more recently for programmable sort of paradigms in the Bitcoin world. So, and a lot of these, what are called Bitcoin layer twos, they're actually marketing themselves as inheriting Bitcoin's proof of work hardware security model, but also offering programmability. And a lot of it is not actually, it's done in a way that feels, I would say, the security properties inherited, I'm not convinced that it's as real as what you could get on Filecoin. And I'll come back to that maybe a little bit later if there's time. The last point here is one that I've done a little bit more research on lately, and I'm not a consensus expert. So, but proof of stake is not 100% agreed on by the industry to be 100% secure all the time. There's a non-zero chance that a proof of stake chain in a doomsday or a black swan event would fail. And in the market, when we look at like all the different products that are out there and blockchains and whatnot, there is no alternative. So all the most popular chains are either very centralized layer twos that have, inheriting Ethereum's security down the road if they actually get there, which is a big if. And then you have others which are faster blockchains like Solana, and these have their own really interesting positions in the market. But again, there's a lot of situations where things like the Solana Foundation is funding certain amounts of validators. There's just a lot of, to me, maybe not a lot, but there are certain failure modes that if they turn on in some world situation, there's not an alternative that looks sufficiently different than these proof of stake weighted chains, right? So this is why I think that there is potentially something valuable in positioning Filecoin, the base layer, as this programmable proof of work-ish chain. And the claim 3 is, to me, we've seen blockchains prove value in both market creation and also stablecoins. The stablecoins are a little bit less relevant for this presentation. Now, going back to the useful proof of work in this original Filecoin thesis, this is super interesting. And what we should look at here is like our current approach is to push and decide what is useful storage and really embed that in the layer one. And that comes with a lot of interference and a lot of friction, has to go through a lot of FIPS and a lot of changes. And actually, I think given enough time with a popular proof of work chain with fair and healthy competition, the hardware providers in those networks will organically resell the storage that they put onto Filecoin because the game theory just makes sense. That is the rational economic action. When there's high speculation value and stuff like that, you might get different short-term outcomes, but just look at Bitcoin. And that's why I put this Bit Chimney space heater. Like Bitcoin miners, after speaking with some more, like just through relationships that we've been developing over the last few years, like Bitcoin miners are very clever in how they recapture value from the work that they're providing in securing Bitcoin. So it's already happening on Bitcoin. And the interesting thing about proof of spacetime is that there's native hooks into reselling the work, which to me just increases the probability that it can and would happen over a long period of time without us having to interfere. This is the natural game theoretical direction that miners would go as long as there's healthy competition on chain. So in this, I want to talk about like very explicitly what I see as the benefits. So one is this concept of, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just because it's a little small. Pledging is the number one reason that new money is acquiring Filecoin. And by creating a fair competition at the base layer through just really going simple, and I'll explain what that means in another slide. I have a little roadmap item here. By going simple, this creates fair and healthy competition. And that will increase the incentive for the large hardware providers in this global economy to come back onto Filecoin, right? Like at the high, we're at 17 exabytes of capacity, and now I think we're right around 3, right? So we've come down quite a bit, and again, that comes with collateral unlocking, like the financial picture of Filecoin. It becomes a lot harder to support Filecoin, the asset, in a valuable way when you have a lot of collateral unlocking. It becomes a lot easier when you have a lot of collateral being locked net new, right? The second thing is one that is just sort of like a realistic picture thing, which is that layer ones, in my mind, for blockchains need to be secure, right? They're like ultimately the most important bottom, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for blockchains, that is the bottom row. Every time that we do FIPS, we change actors, we're introducing new things, economics, we have to really think through all the second order effects of things. We have to get things audited. There's just a lot of process that creates it very hard to iterate quickly, but also makes it easier to introduce bugs or things that we didn't actually realize what would happen, right? Like every time we do these FIPS, we have to do long forecasted financial analysis, which bakes in a lot of assumptions. And we may have to write a lot of new code, which, hopefully should be easy. And we have really great engineers in the ecosystem. But, I think it's important to know that, like, as time ticks and as engineers churn or start working on other projects, you have to get up the learning curve, and it just increases the risk of something going wrong on the layer one. The third point here is that in more recent sort of strategy talks for Filecoin, there's been a lot of focus on Filecoin layer twos, IPC, PDP. Like, these things do not change when you simplify the base layer. They still exist in their same form. You just have a bigger, healthier competition at the base layer. And lastly, like, by ossifying this layer one, by hardening it, we make governance a lot simpler as well. So there's not so many what you say, like, cooks in the kitchen trying to drive this vehicle to find product market fit, right? Like, when we talk about value accrual and product market fit, at least in my perspective, iteration speed is just about one of the highest determinants of success in the probability that you will find product market fit. It's like a science experiment. You want to run many experiments as fast as you can, but you don't want to do it in a way that's going to introduce bugs or security, and you don't want to have to get permission from a whole community and a social consensus to actually run those experiments. So it becomes simpler when we build things sort of on top of this layer one rather than within it. So I want to talk about, like, technical stuff. Like, I'm talking about simplifying things. This is a very abstract kind of pitch. What does this actually mean? So generally, the way to pull this off from a technical perspective is very easy. You essentially just allow anyone to mint data cap, remove the restrictions from the data cap actor. And this immediately creates a fair competition. It also immediately removes a lot of bottlenecks from bringing new pledge onto the network, which again is the current thing that if we had product market fit, we would say that is it. It's miners pledging Filecoin. Like, they have completely customize their machines, their builds to secure the Filecoin blockchain. Right? That's a huge compliment. It's very flattering, and we shouldn't ignore that, because that is product market fit. It's not the full long-term vision of Filecoin, but it's a good start. And so you can see steps like 3, 4, and 5 here are, for me, the aspects of taking, like, separating things. So start with useful proof of work. So this storage game of securing a blockchain network, and then later let's experiment with all types of different decentralized storage markets once we have all this capacity that's securely here, right? And by building on top, we increase the ability to iterate really quickly, right? And so what I would say is, we want to create Filecoin as a palette for securing different protocols that are built on top of it in a non-stake, sort of a non-proof of stake blockchain way. And the first step here would be supporting other foreign runtimes and making it very easy to port your dApps into Filecoin and have very seamless bridging. So Filecoin, its brand, is this archival, this sort of a preservance, right? And we can actually have that same brand with porting dApps. So if you go and approach a dApp that's on any EVM chain, a Solana chain, by pitching them to port it into Filecoin and make it easy to bridge into there, it's a resilience tactic for those dApps, because if there's a doomsday scenario on a proof of stake chain, there's a safe haven in Filecoin, which is built different and in a lot of ways much more secure than the layer twos that we've seen attract a huge mind share for some of these apps. And so I think it's important to also reflect on, what do we risk by doing this? What's the downside? And the downside here is that we do not get to have an opinion at the base layer as to what becomes useful storage, right? So the base layer is a secure blockchain that's secured by hardware, and the assumption and the bet and the pitch that I'm making here today is that that is the separating the layer one blockchain that we've spent a long time and have made a ton of technical innovation on from the cloud storage markets that could be built on top of it is a good thing. It simplifies a lot of stuff for the ecosystem, and it allows us to iterate much quicker on the later parts of this model. So we get the useful work, which we already have, and then we get the cloud on top. And so basically we have to, the thing that we lose is the ability to put humans or extra programmable logic into how inflation on the network is directed, which to me is simplifying a lot of things. But you also then relinquish your ability to have an opinion about what should be considered valuable in the Filecoin economy. Now, sort of the last thing here is, again, I just want to recap that Filecoin, like many other blockchain projects, is searching for product market fit. And so I think it's fun to imagine new types of pitches and also get feedback on them and stuff. So I think I would love to hear from anyone who's heard me kind of stuttering through this jet lagged conversation. What are the flaws here? And what do we risk actually? What am I not thinking of? And alternatively, who likes this? Does this make your life easier in some way? And yeah, so I think that's about all I have here. I'm pretty sure I'm over time as well, but I'd love to, if you're in Dubai or you want to text me on Telegram or, DM me on Twitter, let's have a chat about this, because I think it's an interesting idea that's worth considering. So thank you for your time.